Hey everybody, this is Perch, and this video falls into Rumor Town. I don't normally like to do these videos, but I went ahead and got this story from three separate independent sources, not a source that recommended another source. By the way, when you're doing journalism, and I'm not a journalist major, I'm not pretending to be a news person or any of that, but generally speaking, the rule goes that if you're going to report on a story, you need to have it independently verified. One of the things that seems to be kind of screwed up in today's journalism world is that somebody will give a reporter a tip. The reporter's like, I got to go verify this. The person who gave the reporter the tip goes, yeah, I should talk to my buddy Bob. Bob will confirm this. And then they go talk to buddy Bob, and they're like, okay, this story checks out, two sources, except that's not really two sources. That is a source that basically recommended another source. So you still really only have one source. But anyway, silly ethics. Ethics are for kids. Anyway, I went ahead and got this from, I wanted to get a second completely independent source, not a lead source, and I wound up getting three. So, take this with a grain of salt. It's not fact. I wasn't in the room. Secondhand information. However, three people, same story. Okay, people who would know. The image union, where is it at? Well, if you're keeping track at home, a few people basically declared union rules. Union rules apply, and they went through the process of getting a formal union in comics to represent them. They had a list of grievances / demands that they wanted to get settled with Image. They felt, correctly or incorrectly, I think what I'm about to tell you suggests incorrectly, but they felt like their demands were not going to be met by management or not heard or not listened to or not taken seriously. So they, chatted with each other and decided a union is the way to go. We want to pay dues into a system, and we want to have formal representation. We want to be the first in comics to have a union. And so they did. So they basically asked to be recognized. Image did not recognize them, and so they had to take a vote that forces Image to recognize them. And by the way, at this stage, whether you are pro-union or against union, and I'm not making any judgment of which you are. As I've said in previous videos, I think unions do have a place. They have a role to play. I heard, by the way, that site that slammed me as being the #1 toxic YouTuber. Apparently, the background behind that is I did some videos which the person who wrote the article felt were anti-union. I did some that suggested that some of this stuff was performative and stupid, and therefore I became a corporate shill who, hates unions, hates the worker, and is, very toxic. But that's apparently the origin to that story, which is kind of comical if you think about it. But it also misrepresents my opinion. I do think unions are valuable. I think unions need to have leverage. I think unions, in certain cases, are not valuable and they're just wasting their money. And at other times, they're necessary. I think it varies by opinion. A lot of people don't like to have that nuance. That is a fence-sitter position. But in reality, that's just what I like to call a person who thinks about things position. And I do like to think about things, and I do not think that every shoe fits every foot. But, your mileage may vary. Maybe you're wandering around with your tiny ass feet in size 12 shoes. I don't know. That's your business. So apparently, throughout this entire, course of events, and why I took you through some of that history is exactly the history of how unions typically get formed and get recognition in almost every company. A lot of kind of slimy sites like Bleeding Cool. I'm sorry, why? That's unfair. It's not. It's just a slimy site, not a kind of slimy site. Just slimy site like Bleeding Cool. Made comments to the effect of, Image, declined to recognize a union, like this was a big shot across the bow. Being anti-union. But if you look up and you talk to the unions themselves, the major organizers, they will tell you that 95% of companies do not voluntarily recognize a union. They make it go to a vote. And there's a lot of legal reasons why they do this, both legal internally and also legal for employees who may not like a union. It has happened that a union or a group of people have said, we want to form a union. The company recognizes it out the gate without a vote. And the people who did not like the union or did not want a union then get angry and file grievances against the company because they did not want to be forced into a union. So, generally speaking, if you go to legal counsel, they do recommend a vote. It's not anti-union; it's just the way things get done. But hey, who's letting a little fax get in the way of things? That crazy fax, always, you know. I'm now picturing like somebody like this fax monster is running around in the Scooby Doo gang, yank off the mask, and it's like Mr. Jenkins. Anyway, I don't know. I'm strange that way. Regardless, where does it sit now? Well, apparently, with the formal foundation of the union, the members of the union sat down with the members of management representing the company image, and they went through their list. And are you ready for this? Generally speaking, both sides agreed to make some changes, and those changes were made, or at least were promised to be made, or in the process of being made. And it's things like kind of some working conditions, the request for reviews, that kind of stuff. Those requests were granted because they were just kind of, in my view, pretty typical things that any company that has an HR department would typically do. And maybe there's a question there about uh, why Image wasn't doing that, or how did it get into that weird state where these things were not called for. Who knows? I don't know. But anyway, these demands were things like reasonable hiring practices, reviews, some looks at various things that frankly any of you would want for your company, or you would expect to be any company, but well, whatever. So the demand that didn't get accepted was the last demand, the demand that a committee be formed to give veto rights over projects. Apparently, that demand was a no-go. The management's, maybe I don't know. Again, wasn't in the room, but apparently it was explained to the group that that would violate various contracts, and it isn't the case that the entire company gets to, you know. Get to be a part of who gets to do work and who doesn't get to work, and that's why you have an editor in chief, and that's why you have a selection process, and it wasn't up to committee, and it wasn't something they were going to go with. And drum roll, the group representing the union said, "All right, we understand," and then it was over. To go through these lists in more depth. So, if we look at the demands that were accepted to foster more competitive industry, salary and workload transparency and proposed job titles. Okay, we should know what peers are working on and what they can expect from future employment in terms of a hiring and basic role practice. Yeah, that is a reasonable demand. Most mature companies have that. A request for annual staff and management reviews to assess performance. Yep, that one was accepted. Again, pretty much every company under the sun goes for that one. Creation of a more transparency culture through all hands meetings so staff can understand future priorities. That was accepted. Increased knowledge retention through record keeping and writing down processes. That one was also accepted. And at this point, I don't know. Look, if you're me, you're going, yeah, no shit. And you do, at least for me, you do start to wonder, like, what was going on with Eric Stevenson and some of the management at Image? They weren't writing down processes. I mean, look, a lot of the attention with this whole union went to that last demand. But the rest of these are like, how is this an argument? And I guess it gets to the bigger question, why did you need to form a union to do this? But we'll get there in a second. So additional things: improve career mobility by offering open positions internally first before opening up to the public. Again, most companies do this. Some by law have to do this. Continuation of remote work. Image, I think, let go of most of their office space. I think they're full on remote work, and it was also asking for reasonable accommodations. Basically, putting a stipend in that things like internet and other stuff could be expensed, which again, reasonable. And that was accepted. Better overall product through addition of staff, basically filling unfilled positions. My understanding on that one is that there was a commitment from management to, yes, we will fill unfilled positions and we should get on that. Of course, people need to get hired, so that's, I guess, TBD. I don't know. A long, actionable plan to address lack of diversity in staff and management. by organizing in a way that more accurately reflects demographics. My understanding is the response to this one was, yes, we should get on that. Sure. And then the creation of a collective voting option to cancel publication of titles whose creators have been involved in various things was a, sorry, we cannot do that, but we will make sure that we're, not hiring people who, are criminals. Sure. So that's the outcome. The two sides sat down, and in what is being described as a fairly benign meeting, people got all their crap accepted. All but the one that was never going to get accepted, and the ones that are kind of impossible to do right away, but people are going to promise to work really hard to figure it out. So, all right. By the way, if you're reading into my voice, and a lot of people like to do this, they get into the comments, go, I hear what you're saying, Perch, but I can also tell by the tone of your voice you think something differently. Here's my comment to you. Screw off. You do not know the tone of my voice. You've never met me. Just stop with that crap. I absolutely despise, and yes, I am going to start just removing the comments that seek to come in here and tell me what I'm actually thinking. You're being a jackass if you do that. Like the Elizabeth Warren comment, somebody's like, I hear what you say, but I don't believe you, because shut up. Seriously, shut up. Go somewhere else with that crap. If you hear some exhaustion in my voice, the exhaustion is, I on one hand, a lot of things that are being asked for were entirely reasonable and now are going to be granted. Apparently, it took a conversation for that to happen. So my thought here is, what was preventing a conversation, a basic conversation, from happening in the first place? And here is where this is my question, and it really is a question. Was the image management so inept, so stupid, so full of themselves, so up their own ass that it required the entire bullshit of a union that had to be formed with articles on Gizmodo and IGN and Hollywood Reporter and everyone else to talk about a union being formed? Was all that nonsense necessary in order for image management to basically sit down and have a conversation about doing things that any sane company in their right mind would have been doing in the first place, like writing things down? If that is the case, then this company deserves to die. So sorry, I don't mean it that harsh, but I do a little bit. You got to be kidding me if you go, because there's two ways to look at this. Either the employees were all a bunch of people, a bunch of dicks who were willing to take the company to the brink rather than just sit down and have a conversation. And they wanted to do that because they wanted the virtue points of being able to brag about having their own union and who the hell knows what else. That's one possibility. Possibility number two is what I just mentioned, that the image management rejected basically sitting down with their group and having a conversation about things, that was just too much and they wouldn't do it. And the only way to actually get them to the table to have a basic discussion with their workers about how to run a functional company was that they had to threaten all this nonsense that's gone on over the last 9 months or whatever it's been. Or it's both A and B. And to be honest, I'm pretty sure it's A and B. I think a bunch of these people who were into the union were very happy to get characters of themselves drawn, put on a website, brag about this kind of stuff with their Twitter friends. They were really excited about the Yas Queen nonsense of starting a union and how powerful and awesome they would be. I think that there was plenty of that going on. I think that was definitely a motivation for these people. I also think that the image management, from everything I've heard from numerous people over the years, did have their heads so far up their own ass that they were unwilling to basically even have a conversation about how to run a competent business. Something that gets more believable by the minute if you just look at some of the tweets by some of the people who are on the image management staff. And none of this comes as a big surprise to anyone who's tracking any of that kind of stuff. But here's the outcome. So on one hand, good news. Working conditions are better in image. Okay, that's good. That's a positive outcome. On the other hand, the now image union people who were not paid amazingly well are now going to be paying dues into a system that was pretty much wholly unnecessary unless truly that's what it took to get Image to have a conversation at the management level. Which leads me to basically conclude the union here is worthless, except maybe the threat of the union was required in order for people to do common sense things to run their business properly, in which case, oh my God, we work in a kindergarten. That's kind of my conclusion here. Again, I think there's a good time and a place for a union. I think it can add value to a company. I'm definitely not corporate shill looking to always side on the company, for the corporation. I think a lot of corporations, if left to their own devices, will absolutely F the workers every chance they can get. However, I find it ridiculous that 9 people had to form a union and go to all this stuff. And I think we're very happy to be patting themselves on the back the entire time and making a big show of all this in front of their friends, which was one of the side benefits. And now they're going to basically pay for that benefit out of dues for the remainder of their employment at Image. Was it worth it? I mean, I don't know. It's not mine to say. It's the workers that get to decide whether, they're going to be paying the bills. I expect several of these people to, do GoFundMes to basically get crowdsource their dues. And I think there will be a bunch of dumbasses who will happily give them money to do it. But, I mean, really? That's the response to all this. Really? We this is how it had to go? We had to get to brinksmanship in the company in order to get rules like we will write things down or we will look to our own internal staff to see if anybody can be promoted before hiring outside. I mean, like we need to pay dues for the rest of our life so we can have a yearly review. I mean, from the outside looking in, that's a dumb company. Bluntly, that's just a dumb company. That's a company that is, not. It doesn't have the common sense to just do some of the right things from the beginning. It has to take a threat of a union and all this nonsense in order to get him there. I mean, I would have questions about working for that company in the first place. That's what I would do. Anyway, there you go. That's the outcome. It turns out 2 sides sat at a table, had a conversation, and most things worked out. Also, turns out, remember all those articles and the videos, and now everybody zeroed right in on that last one, that one where it's like, oh my God, these millennials, these woke hipsters are trying to cancel any comic book that has fun through a committee. This is what Image is dead. Well, none of that's going to happen. Yeah, who could have predicted that? Me. Anyway, what do you think of all this? Does it? Maybe you're in a better spot than I am headspace wise, but doesn't it depress you just a little bit that this is where it landed? Like, for all this noise, this is the end outcome. That, now basic common sense things are going to be delivered upon because both sides talk to each other and, they worked it out. Okay. Anyway, there you have it. Let me know what you think of all this nonsense. Let me know how you misinterpret what I say in the comments below. And thanks for listening.